kid who climbed a lot of trees in the Midwest growing up. Grew up with a mom that was a Girl Scout leader that did a whole lot of things with gardens and canning vegetables and teaching her children, those kind of values, cooking at home. Grew up with her mother, my grandmother Nana, who came and began to live with us when I was about 10 years old, who added in, besides all of those kind of activities, a very much a passion for reading and learning, and her educational presence was dynamic. And Chef Norman was very much fed and nourished by that background. My mom was also in the restaurant business, and so I was around the restaurant business as a kid, with no idea that I would one day be in the restaurant business. But when you're doing your geography lesson at the kitchen table and your mom is counting the tips that she made that day, and trying to stack up the nickels and turn them into quarters, you get that education, that grounding. And then Chef Norman became a guy that decided that he'd had quite enough of winter and ran off to Key West and started a life down there. So my early childhood memories with food in the kitchen, well, we lived in north of Chicago, so we were 4 seasons up there, much different than life in Florida. So we would do some things that, in the winter, I just remember the kitchen windows steaming up with our activities and peering out and seeing the snow behind the windows, and much preferring to be inside the kitchen with my mother and my 2 sisters and my grandmother, cooking. I just loved helping. I loved the smell of food. I loved the transformation of, seeing the strawberries get cooked and then canned. Not that happened in the winter time, but I loved being around it all. Years later, people say, "How do you come up with all these ideas for your dishes?" And I tell them the truth, and they don't think I'm telling them the truth when I say, I think I was just very hungry. And it is the Proustian sort of dynamic with me. I mean, it is the transformation that you feel when you eat really well. It's something that if you're lucky enough to be born with that kind of receptiveness to food, and then you turn that receptiveness to something that is about turning it around and then giving it to other people. That's what really attracted to me to becoming a cook, which is what I was long before I was a chef. I think that takes curiosity. I think it takes discipline. I think it takes great patience. Teamwork is incredibly important. The willingness to put the mission in front of your own self and your own needs many times, because it's a very exacting profession. You're going to be there untold hours. You're going to be there weekends, and you're going to be there holidays. And so those are things that have to be okay with you. And fortunately for me, I'd had other jobs, because being a chef wasn't what it's become. I had no idea I'd be a chef when I was 19 and 20 years old, and so after my time with school ended, I ended up doing things like working in factories, hating it, working landscaping, drudgery, working as a hot towel roofer, hellish, working in a carnival, crazy, and then I answered a job for a short order cook, and work turned itself around. It went from being something that I endured. I looked at the clock over and over again, wishing it was later so I could be off, whereas when I got into cooking, it was like I didn't want it to be noon yet, because I wanted to be more ready for the noon rush. I didn't want to be 5 o'clock yet, because I would be more ready for the dinner rush. So it had a reverse effect on the way I looked at work. It was something I was loving. I think being an artist is something that you have like moments of grace. I don't think you're an artist every minute. I think that there are times when you attain an artistic level in your day or in your life, and those moments have to be supported by the parts of your management of it all to be able to get to that place. I remember being a young chef where I was first a sous chef, and they said, well, we want to change you from being a line chef to being the sous chef. And I realized soon that I was going to be doing things that were about management, and so I said, I will do this, but one day a week. I want to do what I call the creation station, which means that on that day I can set aside the managerial tasks and be purely allowed to go after creating what I hope become specials. And so my chef allowed me to cut that deal. And so it's really, there's no way you're going to survive only being the artist. You have to be the director as well as the artist. Being successfully married for over 40 years in this business, that's not something that one should take for granted. To have a good family life, that's really important. And I've been sustained by that, with a person that I met in the very first place. I was a short order cook and she was a waitress in high school, trying to make some tip money so she could go out and buy a couple of albums or maybe a purse or something, like that. On the professional side, two things come to mind. One is, there have been amazing awards, and I'm very proud of them. To be the only chef so far in the James Beard Foundation's Who's Who, I think that is extraordinary, because I get to vote on who becomes part of the Who's Who. Now I know, what it takes to get in the Who's Who, and I know who's not there yet, and I know who I wish were in there so far. But it's quite an elite group. And the other thing on the professional side is the mentoring that I'm now in that part of my life where there are so many young people that, at least young by my standards, that are around me that I get to try and provide for them a little less steep of a climb up the hill than maybe people of my generation had. I don't know if I'm successful at that, but I'm always I might be on the other side of the line more times right now than on the line with them, but trying to provide for them, whether it's an emotional thing or it's a technical thing, I'm trying to get them to where they're less cutting themselves and burning themselves metaphorically, if not physically. I come from a small town. The town that I was born in was small, not quite as small as this, but it was a very small town during, the 50s and 60s, and so it had this very gentle vibration to it, and so that attracted me to Mount Dora when I first came here. And I was also in a small town of sorts when I lived for 20 years in Key West. It hadn't yet become, Margaritaville, it hadn't become that success. The cruise lines were not there in the 70s, and so it was a small town, but it allowed me a nurturing atmosphere to grow as a young chef coming up. I came here to do a charity event. I was invited by a very special person, and that person showed me the town and introduced me to a member of the community who helps build and restore a lot of the properties around here, and that group that he's a part of are substantially part of the fabric of Mount Dora. The very first night, though, where I met him, it was because he had invited me and my wife Janet to attend a barbecue at his house, and my friend that had told me about him, whose name is Heather McPherson, verified that he was world championship barbecue person. So we were like, yeah, we'll go. We'll be happy to take that invitation and go to his home. And Larry Baker provided us with an extraordinary meal. And then, like Heather had before him, he drove us around town and showed us the town. And in that conversation that we had that day. He told me how much they loved to go to our restaurant at the Ritz-Carlton in Orlando over the years, he and his partners here. And then one thing led to another, and about a year later, we began to discuss doing 1921. Sometimes the writing is literally on the wall. And so we thought about many different names, but we were, sitting outside on the park bench out there and just all of a sudden looking up the numerals 1921 that have been on this building since 1921 when it was built and painted, and those numerals went up. And boom, we realized that it was important that geographically people would understand where this was. And we also liked the fact that it provides a very quick realization that there is history to this building. So there's my name and then the year, so tie those together. And it also, I think, speaks to part of the mission for us is in regards to the cuisine of the restaurant, which is to do cuisine that is both rooted in the past and in the longevity of the food history of Florida, but also being awake to the modernism that's going on, not only with ourselves, but with the Modernism Museum, our partners who have the museum right across the street, the Modernism Museum. And so we wanted to fuse those together. I think guests should expect what they should expect everywhere, which is to be treated just beautifully with, humanity and intelligence. These are the long-lasting lessons that whether it was taught by my mother or anybody's mother or anybody's guidance counselor, those are the things. You can be as fancy as can be, but if you don't connect with people on that deep emotional level, then I don't think you're really part of the hospitality business that's going to, it's really going to remain a long-term memory for the guest. And that's what we seek to do. We seek to do really relevant and delicious food, sure. We seek to do food that is locally provided as much as we possibly can, but we also seek to do it with sort of a gentle graciousness that we try to teach those things, but they're not things that are easily taught. You have to actually hire people that have those qualities in their lives and their hearts, and then just pretty much guide them on the facts, the specifics of it. But we need to hire beautiful people, good people, and then let them be themselves in many ways too. My favorite dish is always the one that's being made that day, the newest thing. I'm proud of the dishes that have become, the hallmark dishes of my Norman Van Aken career. I know that I've used the analogy before, but it's an apt one. If I was to go to see Tony Bennett sing, I'd want to hear him sing "I Left My Heart in San Francisco," right? But he's an artist who didn't get into being an artist because he was going to sing one song all over and over and again. He's an American icon of modern pop and jazz and all of that. So I'm sure that there are things that he would like to sing that he only sang for the first time that day or recently. And so for me, it's really the combination of, yes, I enjoy serving them the signature dishes, as it's called, but I also enjoy seeing, what our team is doing that might have been triggered by something I've spoken to them about. And then because it is very much a collaborative effort here. I'm in civilian clothing right now because I just flew in from our home in Miami, where I'm just about to open up my cooking school, and haven't had a chance to put on my chef coat yet. And so Chef Camillo and Chef Glorianne, who head up our kitchen here, they deserve tremendous spotlight and credit for what we do here every day in, day out, night in, night out. Well, our future plans for 1921 are to include that we will do a lot more private parties. We've purchased the property immediately next door. It's being restored, and to to build the private party business is our future plan for this. We have an amazing kitchen and beautiful dining rooms. I don't know if the camera will be able to show that, but we are in one room. We're in the chef's table room here in the restaurant, but there are other rooms that would fit all different sizes of parties, and then the property next door would be able to accommodate a large wedding. So those are future plans. I just completed my 6th cookbook, and it just won the Florida Book Award and Gold Medal Award. So I'm very happy about that. Surprised and happy. And I'm sure I'll write another book. Seems to be something I've been doing for the last 30 years. Not quite tomorrow. And then I'm opening up with my partners and Janet cooking school in Miami called In the Kitchen with Norman Van Aken. And that is part of actually a 3-part endeavor in Miami, the cooking school, a restaurant named 3, and a lounge up on the roof called Number 3 Social. So those things are very busy, and then, we're always doing new dinners at our restaurant at the Ritz-Carlton, Norman's, which has been in operation now for 15 years. And so we continue to spin along, and we continue to enjoy showcasing modern Florida cuisine and try to have people who visit Florida realize the depth of opportunity that you have when it comes to the flavors of our state. We're not just a pretty place with palm trees and an ocean and great fishing and other things like that, which are all beautiful and wonderful, but we are seriously capacious in terms of cuisine. It's a great place to be a cook, which I am.